On my 75th birthday, a box appeared on my porch. It was crafted from polished mahogany with gold trim, like somebody put real thought into it. There was no return address on it, just a little card with 2 words, Happy Birthday. But I recognized the handwriting, no doubt about it. It was my daughter, Madison's. We hadn't spoken for what felt like forever. Inside, there were 8 Cuban cigars, the fancy kind a guy might have bragged about to his buddies back in the day. The thing is, Madison never seemed to care that I'd quit smoking 5 years ago, not after pneumonia almost took my last breath. She never asked about my lungs. She never asked about me. So, I just gave the cigars to Henry Ford, her father-in-law, a real old buddy who still liked a good smoke. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was Madison's way of remembering me again. But the very next day, Henry went down, gasping for air. The doc said it wasn't some kind of sickness. It was poison. And right then and there, the truth hit me harder than any disease could have. My daughter hadn't remembered me. She'd only remembered what she stood to get once I was gone for good. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The hospital reeked of that antiseptic stuff and fear. I stood next to Henry's bed, watching his chest rise and fall as the machines beeped and hummed. Tubes ran out of his arms and monitors blinked. He was still with us, but just barely. His wife, Brenda, was sitting in the corner, her hands shaking around a styrofoam cup of coffee. "Mike," she whispered, her voice all cracked up. "They said it wasn't his heart. They said it was something he smoked." My gut twisted into a knot. I saw that mahogany box in my mind's eye. Madison's handwriting. The cigars. I gave them to him, I admitted quietly. They came to me first. Her eyes got wide, filled with horror. She started, but she didn't need to finish. She just looked at me. I left the hospital that night with way more questions than answers. The December air cut right through my jacket as I walked to my truck. Every breath stung a little, just like the memory of my pneumonia 5 years back. I hadn't touched tobacco since. Madison knew that. Or at least she should have. Why in the world would she send them? And why now? After all those years of nothing. When I got home, I put the empty mahogany box on the kitchen table. The gold trim seemed to mock me under the light. I picked up the card again, just those 2 words. Happy Birthday. No signature, no warmth, just handwriting I couldn't miss. Sharp, deliberate, just like Madison. The memories started to pile up. Her as a little kid, braids in her hair, laughing as she ran across the lawn. The way she used to sit on my lap while I had a cigar on summer nights, pretending she was drawing maps on my chest with her finger. That little girl was gone. In her place was a woman I hardly knew, one who hadn't called me dad in a lifetime. I sat there until well past midnight, staring at that box. The house was quiet, too quiet. Ever since her mother Helen passed, silence had been my only company. Finally, I picked up the phone. The next morning, I walked right into the local police station. Detective Sanchez, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a voice that meant business, met me in the lobby. "You're saying your daughter sent you cigars, and the man who smoked them is in the intensive care unit," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes." My voice was steady, but on the inside, I was shaking like a leaf. "The doctor said it wasn't a sickness. Said it was poison. And that box, I slid it across her desk. That's where they came from." She looked at it carefully, lifting the lid, sniffing the wood. Then she leaned back. "We'll get some tests run. But Mr. Carter, this is a pretty serious claim. Are you sure your daughter sent them?" "I know her handwriting," I said, my voice cold as ice. "A father never forgets." Sanchez nodded slowly, scribbling something in her notebook. "We'll need to confirm that." That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. Every creak of the house sounded like a whisper. Every shadow seemed to have her face. I just sat in my recliner staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly Madison stopped being my daughter and started being whatever she was now. At 4 a.m., the phone rang. It was Henry's wife. "They say he's stable," she said, her voice full of relief, but they confirmed it wasn't natural. "The doctors think it was something in the cigar." My heart just dropped. I thanked her and hung up. I walked out onto the porch, lit by the dim glow of the security lamp, and looked out at the dark yard. The night was silent except for a dog barking far away. I gripped the railing with both hands. "Madison, why would you try to erase me?" 5 days later, Detective Sanchez called. "We ran some tests," she said. "The cigars were laced with aconite. It's a rare plant toxin, extremely deadly, even in small amounts." I didn't say anything. "Mr. Carter," she went on, "is there any reason your daughter would want you dead?" The question bounced around in my chest. Images flashed through my mind. Madison asking about my pension 6 years ago. Her offhand remarks about my life insurance. The way she'd pulled away after she got married, only reaching out when money was on the table. "She has her reasons," I mumbled. Sanchez's tone got sharper. "We need to hear them." A week later, Madison called. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "Mike, did you get my gift?" I froze, gripping the receiver until my knuckles turned white. "Yes, I did." She paused, then asked, "Did you try one?" "No," I said, my voice even. "I gave them to Henry." A long silence, then a laugh, high and brittle. "Well, I guess that works, too." Something in the sound of her voice sent a chill down my spine. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, playing every single word back in my head. The next weekend, I drove past her house. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that I was just taking the long way home. But when I saw her car in the driveway, shiny and new, I couldn't help but wonder how much of that was bought with patience, and how much with cold, hard calculation. In the window, I saw her silhouette, laughing with her husband Caleb. She looked happy, like she didn't have a care in the world, as if she hadn't just sent her father a box of death. I didn't knock. I just sat there in my truck until the sun disappeared behind the trees, then drove away. That night, I pulled out the old folder where I kept all my financial stuff, life insurance policies, the deed to the house, retirement savings, all neatly filed. I stared at the papers, suddenly realizing how much they meant, not to me, but to her. She hadn't asked about my health in years, but she'd asked about these, about beneficiaries, about coverage amounts. Maybe she hadn't forgotten me. Maybe she'd just been planning on me being gone. The next few weeks were a blur of police visits, hospital updates, and nights without sleep. Sanchez kept pushing me for details, dates, conversations, anything that could connect Madison to intent. I told her everything I could remember. Meanwhile, Henry slowly got better, although his voice was weaker, his laugh quieter. One afternoon, I went to see him. "Mike, you're a lucky man," he rasped, trying to smile. "If you hadn't quit smoking, we'd be planning your funeral instead of mine." I faked a smile, but my heart felt like it was made of lead. Lucky, that's what they called it. But luck had nothing to do with it. It was about surviving. And I realized that surviving would take more than just luck. It would take patience. Because Madison had made her move. Now, it was my turn. When Detective Sanchez asked me why my daughter might want me dead, I didn't answer right away. How do you explain years of silence, of little things that seemed small at the time but cut deeper over time? How do you put into words that the little girl you once carried on your shoulders now looks at you like you're just some obstacle instead of her father? I sat there in her office, staring at the dull beige walls, and thought back to the last real conversation Madison and I had before it all went to hell. It was 8 years ago, not long after her wedding. She came to my house, her husband Caleb in tow, both of them dressed sharp with smiles that were way too wide. They sat at my kitchen table, where her mother Helen used to lay out Sunday dinners, and slid a stack of papers across to me. "Dad," Madison said, her voice sugary sweet. "We found a house. It's perfect for us. We just need a little help with the down payment." I remember looking at those papers. The numbers were in bold, more zeros than I'd ever seen in my own bank account. "Madison," I said, calm but firm. "I can't give you that kind of money. Not all at once. I'm retired. I live on a fixed income." Her smile faltered. Her husband Caleb leaned forward, his voice getting sharper. "But you've got assets. The house, your pension, the life insurance. You don't even need all of it." I just stared at him, then back at her. "That money is for my medical bills, for me to live on. And one day, yeah, whatever's left will go to you. But not now. Not like this." Madison's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You're telling me you'd rather hold on to your savings than help me build a life?" I wanted to tell her it wasn't about holding on. It was about surviving. But in that moment, I realized she didn't see me as her father anymore. She saw me as a bank vault that wouldn't open. She left that day without hugging me, without even looking back. Back in Sanchez's office, I finally spoke. She asked me for money once. I couldn't give it to her. She never got over it. Sanchez tapped her pen thoughtfully. "People kill for less." Her words were cold, clinical, but they still hit me hard. That night, I sat on the porch with an old blanket draped over my shoulders, listening to the wind rattle the trees. Pneumonia had left me with weaker lungs, all scarred up. Every breath was a reminder that my time was already running out faster than most folks. I thought about Madison's gift, the cigars, and the truth was undeniable. She wasn't just impatient. She was done waiting. But I couldn't stop thinking about the little girl she used to be. I remember one Christmas when she was 10. Money was tight. I could only afford one real gift, a used bicycle I'd found at a garage sale and repainted in the garage late at night. When she saw it, her face lit up like fireworks. She hugged me so tight my ribs ached. "It's perfect, Daddy," she whispered. "How does a child who once clung to you like that turn into a woman who signs your death warrant with her own handwriting?" A week later, Sanchez called again. "We can't prove who laced the cigars," she said. "No fingerprints, no DNA, just your word about the handwriting." "My word is enough," I snapped. "Not in court," she said, her voice steady. "Not yet." The line went quiet, but her words hung in the air like smoke. I drove to the cemetery the next day. My wife Helen's grave was there. The headstone was weathered, but clean. I knelt down, brushing leaves off the base and whispered, "Helen, I don't know what happened to her. I don't know how our little girl turned into this." The wind was her answer, cold and empty. That evening, I decided to test Madison. I dialed her number, my hand shaking on the receiver. "Madison," I said when she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was smooth, cautious. "I was just thinking about you." "Were you?" I asked. "Of course. How are you feeling? Did you enjoy your birthday?" I paused. "I did, though it was almost my last." Silence, just for a moment. Then she laughed. "Dad, you sound so dramatic." "It was just a gift." I pushed. "A gift I didn't use. Henry did. And now he's barely alive." Another silence, heavier this time. Then she said, her voice cold as glass, "Well, maybe he should have known better." I swallowed hard. "Madison, what's happened to you?" But she just hung up. For hours after, I sat in the dark, the phone still in my hand. Those words kept replaying in my head. Maybe he should have known better. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't denial. It was a simple calculation. And I knew then that Henry was never the real target. I was. The following weekend, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store, a woman named Brenda, who'd known Madison since she was a girl. "How's Madison?" she asked, all cheerful. I forced a smile. "She's busy." Brenda nodded. "Always was ambitious. I saw her last week, you know. Drove by in a new car. Must be doing well." I clenched my teeth. Of course, she was doing well. She'd married into money, charmed her way into a wealthy family. But still, she wanted more. My more. That night, I pulled out my will. I hadn't updated it in years. Madison was still listed as the sole beneficiary. My chest tightened. I couldn't change the past, but I could decide the future. I met with my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a week later. He was an old guy himself, glasses sliding down his nose as he shuffled papers. "You're thinking of changing your will?" he asked. "Yes." My voice was steady. "Effective immediately." He looked at me carefully. "May I ask why?" I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I said, "Because the person I trusted to take care of me one day has already tried to put me in the ground." Harrison blinked, then nodded slowly. "Understood. Who do you want listed instead?" I thought for a good long moment. Henry came to mind. His family, maybe even some foundation. Anybody but her. "Not Madison," I said finally. "Anyone but her." The big shock came that very same evening. As I drove home from Harrison's office, headlights flared in my rearview mirror. A car was following me, too close, too steady. I turned onto a side street. The car turned too. My heart started to race. I pulled into my driveway, watching as the car slowed at the corner, then just disappeared. Coincidence? Maybe. But I knew in my gut that it was something else. That night, I dreamed about the bicycle again, the one I painted red for Madison when she was 10. That was when the dream changed. This time, she didn't just ride away, she rode straight off a cliff and never looked back. I woke up, and the first rays of the sun were just creeping into my window. The house felt colder than it ever had. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at that mahogany box. It was empty, but man, it felt heavy with meaning. Madison had played her cards, but she didn't know I had a hand of my own. Not yet. I took a sip of that bitter coffee and made myself a silent promise. I wasn't going to let her win. Not with my money, not with my life, and not with my name. The morning after I changed my will, I found a note slipped under my front door. It wasn't in an envelope, just a folded piece of paper with my name scrawled across the top. "Dad," it read. "I think we should talk. Madison." The handwriting was the same sharp, deliberate style as the card in the cigar box. My stomach tightened. She hadn't left me a birthday card out of love. It was a trap. And now she wanted to meet. For a second, I thought about tearing it up. But then a different thought hit me. Maybe this was my chance. Not to fix things, but to see her for who she really was, without all the old memories clouding my judgment. So I called her. Her voice was all honey and caution. "Dad, I'm so glad you called." "You wanted to talk," I said. "Yes. Dinner tomorrow night." Neutral territory. Neutral territory. That phrase struck me. It was like she was negotiating with an enemy, not inviting her old man out. But I agreed anyway. The next evening, I drove to a small Italian place on the edge of town. She was already there, sitting by the window with a glass of wine that she hadn't touched. She looked the part of a successful daughter, with perfect hair and a tailored dress. There was a big diamond on her hand that could blind a man in the sunlight. "Dad, she said with a fake smile. You look good. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap so she couldn't see them tremble. You wanted to talk? Yes. She leaned forward. I feel so bad that we've been so distant. Life is short. I don't want to have any regrets. Her words were smooth, but her eyes kept darting around, looking at my watch, at the pen in my shirt pocket, at anything that gleamed. I nodded slowly. Regrets. She took a sip of her wine, then said softly, You know, Dad, I've been so worried about you living alone. What if something happens? You should think about making arrangements to make things easier. There it was. The play. I've already thought about it, I said. I just updated my will. For the first time, her mask slipped. A quick flicker of panic, and then it was gone. Oh, well, that's good, she said a little too fast. That's very responsible. I held her gaze. You don't need to worry about me, Madison. I've taken care of everything. Silence stretched between us, as tight as a wire. Finally, she smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's all I wanted, Dad. Just to know you're okay. I left that dinner with the bitter taste of marinara still on my tongue, but also with a sense of certainty. She hadn't invited me to make up. She had wanted to check on me, to measure me, and she had learned something she didn't expect. She no longer held the keys to my estate. That night, I pulled out my insurance policy. Helen and I had gotten it decades ago, when Madison still had braids in her hair. Back then, she was the only beneficiary because who else would it be? But now, the thought of her cashing that check with a smile on her face sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, I drove to the insurance office and sat across from a young guy with slick back hair and eager eyes. You want to change your beneficiary? He asked. Yes. May I ask to whom? Henry Ford, I said without a second of hesitation. The man blinked. Your friend. He almost died because of a gift meant for me. He deserves something if I can't be here to give it to him myself. The pen scratched against the paper as I signed the forms. My chest felt lighter as I slid them back across the desk. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just waiting for the next hit. I was making moves of my own. A week later, Madison showed up at my front door. Dad, she said, forcing a brightness into her voice. Can I come in? I hesitated, then opened the door. She looked around my simple living room like she was appraising it. I was in the neighborhood, she said. Thought I'd stop by. I pointed to a chair. Sit. She perched delicately, crossing her legs, her perfume so strong it could choke a weaker man. Dad, I've been thinking maybe I was a little too harsh before. Asking for help. I mean, I get that you have your own needs. I raised an eyebrow. Do you? She smiled, tilting her head. Of course, but I also think families should support each other. I would do the same for you. The lie was so smooth, I almost admired it. I leaned forward. Madison, let's stop playing games. You didn't give me those cigars because you cared. You gave them to me because you hoped I'd smoke them. Her face froze for a second. Then she laughed, a light, empty sound. Dad, that's ridiculous. Henry almost died. She waved her hand. Accidents happen. I stood up. Not this kind of accident. For the first time, her mask completely shattered. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed. You're paranoid, she hissed. You've always been paranoid. No wonder Mom. She stopped herself, but it was too late. I felt the words like a knife. No wonder Mom. She was about to twist the knife deeper. I slowly let out my breath. Get out, Madison. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she got up, grabbed her purse, and left without another word. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the mahogany cigar box in front of me, empty, but still heavy. I thought of Madison as a kid, falling asleep on my chest after story time. I thought of her teenage years, slamming doors, calling me old-fashioned. I thought of her wedding, the way she smiled at Caleb but never looked back at me. And then I thought of her tonight, with venom dripping from her words. I realized something. This wasn't just about money. Madison hated me for living, for lasting longer than she wanted. And that meant she wasn't going to stop. So I began to plan. Not with rage, but with patience, with precision, and with the tools Madison could never understand. Law, paper, and time. I called Harrison again. One more thing, I said. I want to set up a trust. Something ironclad. Madison doesn't get a dime. Harrison gave a dry chuckle. Sounds like a war. No, I said. It's survival. The twist came 5 days later. A letter arrived in the mail, looking all official. It was from a law firm I didn't know. Mr. Carter, it read. We represent Madison Ford. This is to inform you of her intent to pursue guardianship proceedings, citing concerns about your mental competency. I stared at the words until they blurred. Guardianship. She wasn't just waiting for me to die. She was trying to declare me unfit to live. The letter shook in my hand long after I finished reading it. Petition for guardianship. Concerns of declining mental competency. Those weren't just words on paper. They were a blade sharpened and polished by my own daughter. Guardianship. If she succeeded, she wouldn't need to wait for my will or my life insurance. She would own my life while I was still breathing. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where Helen and I used to play cards on quiet nights. I whispered to the empty chair across from me, she's trying to bury me alive. The next morning, I marched into Harrison's office. He took one look at my face and pushed a stack of files aside. Tell me, he said. I handed him the letter. His lips moved silently as he read. Then he leaned back with a long sigh. Guardianship. That's bold and it's ugly. She wants to prove I'm not of sound mind, I said, my voice low. She wants the court to take away all my decisions. Harrison tapped the paper. Don't underestimate her, Mike. These petitions can be dangerous. If she brings in doctors, neighbors, even records of mistakes, judges take them seriously. What mistakes? I asked sharply. He hesitated. Tell me honestly, have you had any lapses? Forgetting bills, medication, leaving the stove on. I clenched my jaw. I'm 75, not senile. I remember more than she ever gave me credit for. Harrison leaned forward. Then we fight, but we do it carefully. This isn't about anger. It's about evidence. If she wants to build a case against you, we'll build one that's stronger for you. That week, Madison began her act. Neighbors came by with strange stories. Mrs. Brenda from across the street. Your daughter mentioned you've been a little confused lately. Said you left your front door wide open all night. A pharmacist, squinting at me. Madison told us you sometimes forget your prescriptions. We've been advised to keep an eye on you. And at church, whispers spread like wildfire. Such a shame. Poor Mike isn't all there anymore. Good thing Madison stepping in. It was a campaign as methodical as any election. She wasn't just poisoning cigars. She was poisoning reputations. I started keeping a journal. Every conversation, every visit, every single detail, dates, times, names. If she wanted to drag me into court, I'd bring the truth, all bound up in leather. One evening, as I wrote at the kitchen table, the phone rang. I picked it up expecting Harrison. It was Madison. "Dad," she said, her tone as sweet as syrup. "I heard you've been having some trouble. Bills, medicine, doors unlocked." "Funny," I replied. "I heard the same thing. I wonder where those rumors started." Silence. Then, in a voice as sharp as glass, she said, "You can make this easy, you know. Just sign over the power of attorney. You won't have to go through the embarrassment of a hearing." I laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from my chest in months. Embarrassment. "Madison, the only embarrassment here is you." She hung up. The hearing came 4 weeks later. The courthouse smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I wore my best suit, the one Helen had pressed for me before her last Sunday service. Harrison stood at my side, steady as a lighthouse. Madison arrived with her lawyer, a slick guy in a $2,000 suit who looked like he hadn't missed a meal in years. Madison herself was wearing black, as if she were already in mourning for me. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, opened the session. "Petition for guardianship over Mr. Mike Carter. Ms. Hale, you may begin." Madison rose gracefully. "Your Honor. My father has been declining. He forgets basic tasks, leaves his home unsecured, and neglects his health. I fear for his safety." She motioned to her lawyer, who produced papers and affidavits, testimony from neighbors, records from his pharmacy, even statements from family friends. Whispers filled the courtroom. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carter, how do you respond?" I stood up slowly, the weight of every year in my back, but none in my voice. "Your Honor, I may not be young, but I am not incompetent. I have managed my home, my finances, and my health with more care than my daughter ever managed her marriage." Gasps rippled through the room. Madison's face turned red. I held up my leather journal. I have documented every interaction since she began this campaign. Dates, times, exact words. Neighbors pressured, pharmacists misled, a slander machine designed not to protect me, but to control me. Harrison stepped forward, handing the judge copies of my will updates, my insurance changes, and my medical records, all neatly in order. "This is not a man who is incapable of managing his own life. This is a man targeted by greed." The judge skimmed the papers, her brow furrowing. Then she looked at Madison. "Ms. Hale, it is unusual for a daughter to seek guardianship of a parent who maintains this level of organization and independence. I see more evidence of calculation on your part than decline on his." Madison's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a look. "Petition denied," she declared. The gavel struck like thunder. Outside the courtroom, Madison cornered me. Her mask was gone now, replaced by a sneer. "You think this is over," she hissed. "You think one ruling will stop me?" I met her eyes, calm and steady. "It won't stop you, Madison, but it will slow you down. And every day you waste chasing my death, I'll be living." Her lips trembled with rage. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, stepping past her. "You will." That night, I sat on my porch, the cool air on my face. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of suspicion on my chest. But the peace didn't last long. Because I knew Madison. She didn't accept defeat. She adapted. And as the stars blinked overhead, I knew the war wasn't over. It had just moved to a different battlefield. If she couldn't take me through the courts, she would find another way. And I had to be ready. The envelope looked ordinary, but ordinary things are often the most dangerous. I slid it open with my old pocket knife, the one Helen had given me for our 15th anniversary. Inside was a letter from my bank. Confirmation of transfer, it read. Property deed reassigned. Signature verified. My hand froze on the page. Transfer. Signature. I hadn't signed a thing. I pulled the paper closer, studying the scrawled name at the bottom. It was mine, or at least it pretended to be. The loops and curves mimicked decades of checks and receipts. But it wasn't my hand. It was hers, Madison's. She had forged me. I drove straight to the bank, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The branch manager, a young guy with perfect hair and no sense of history in his eyes, greeted me with a smile that disappeared as soon as I laid the letter on his desk. "I never said yes to this," I said, my voice flat. "That is not my signature." He studied it, then looked at me nervously. "Mr. Carter, it went through all the usual channels. The notary confirmed it. We even have a witness statement." "Witness?" I asked. "Who?" He shuffled papers. "Your daughter, Madison Ford." I let out a bitter laugh. So, the witness to my signature was the very person who forged it. His face turned pale. "Sir, if that's true." "It's true. And if this bank doesn't reverse it right now, you'll be defending yourself in court right alongside her." Back in Harrison's office, I dropped the letter on his desk. He adjusted his glasses, scanning every word. "She's clever," he mumbled. "Forgery, false witness, notary manipulation. This isn't a desperate child, Mike. This is calculated fraud." I nodded grimly. "She wants me to be broke. If guardianship didn't work, she'll just starve me out instead." Harrison leaned back. "We can fight this, but we'll need proof beyond handwriting. Financial forensics, paper trails, the kind of details most people miss." "Details," I repeated softly. "That's where I live." That night, I opened the old filing cabinet in my study. Decades of documents I had kept meticulously. Helen used to tease me about my obsession with keeping receipts from as far back as the 80s. But now, every little slip of paper felt like a soldier in an army I'd been quietly building my whole life. I laid out samples of my real signature, mortgage payments, tax returns, even the card I'd signed for Helen's last hospital admission. Then I compared them to the forgery. The difference was subtle, but it was a killer. The tail of my K in my signature. Madison's version trailed off, weak and shaky. My T was always crossed with 2 deliberate strokes. Hers sagged like a tired branch. To a stranger, it was close enough. To me, it was a stranger wearing my face. The next day, Harrison and I sat across from a forensic handwriting expert. She was a small woman with eyes that saw too much. She examined the signatures with a magnifying glass, tracing every line. "This isn't yours," she said finally. "Not even close. It's a deliberate mimicry, but the tremors in the strokes," she was anxious, under pressure. "Whoever forged this was trying to be perfect, and in trying, they gave themselves away." Harrison smiled grimly. "That's what I needed to hear. We'll get a subpoena for the notary records, too. If Madison got someone else in on this, we'll drag them into the light." I thought I was ready for anything. But nothing could have prepared me for the confrontation that came a week later. I was walking back from church when Madison's car pulled up next to me. She rolled down the window, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Dad," she called. "Need a ride, or are you still capable of walking on your own?" I kept on walking. She pulled up alongside me, persistent. "Why are you fighting me? Do you want to spend your last years drowning in bills and paperwork and hospitals?" I stopped and turned to face her. "I'd rather drown with dignity than float on your mercy." Her eyes flashed. "You think the court will believe you over me? I'm younger, sharper. I have connections. You just have old papers and your word." "Old papers," I said, stepping closer to her window. "And a truth that doesn't fade. That's all I need." She leaned in, her voice a hiss. "You should have just signed it over willingly. You're just delaying the inevitable." With a smirk, she drove off, her tires spitting gravel like venom. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I just sat by the window, watching the shadows stretch across my lawn. I thought of Helen, of her steady hand sorting bills, her voice calming me down when numbers felt like enemies. I whispered to her ghost, "She's not just after money, Helen. She wants to erase me before my story's finished." The house felt colder than it ever had. But somewhere in that cold, I found a little bit of steel. If Madison wanted to play games with signatures, I'd give her one she could never fake. 2 weeks later, Harrison and I met again. He had a glimmer in his eye. "We got her," he said. "The handwriting expert is ready to testify. And the notary." He let out a short laugh. Said Madison paid him under the table to just rubber stamp the documents. I let out a long breath. "So it's fraud, black and white." "Fraud and conspiracy," Harrison said. "Enough to sink her if we press charges." "Not yet," I replied. Harrison frowned. "Not yet, Mike. She's trying to ruin you." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "And she'll try again. If we strike too soon, she'll find another angle. I want her to be overconfident. I want her to believe she's winning. Then we take everything in one blow." That weekend, Madison came by the house unexpectedly. She stood on my porch with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I thought maybe we could talk," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked in, glancing around like she already owned the place. "Dad," she began. "I know things have been tense, but you need to see this from my side. I'm only trying to protect you. You're old. You forget things." I just stared at her. The only thing I forgot, Madison, was how far greed can twist someone I raised. Her smile faltered. I kept going, calm but sharp. "You can steal my signature. You can whisper lies. But you can't rewrite the truth. And you can't kill a man who refuses to stop breathing." Her face hardened. "Then I guess we'll see how long you keep breathing." She turned and left. The door clicked shut like a gavel. That night I sat at my desk again, pen in hand. But this time I wasn't just writing in my journal. I was planning. Madison had made her move. Now it was my turn. The idea came to me in the quiet hours of the night. Sitting at my desk, the house wrapped in silence, I realized the only way to outsmart Madison was to give her something to chase. A decoy, a bone so tempting she couldn't ignore it. I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out an old leather folder. Inside were stock certificates from the late 80s, most of them worthless after the market crashed, but to someone greedy and careless, they might look like gold. I smiled faintly. If she wants to bleed me dry, let's see how fast she runs toward a vein that's already empty. The next morning, I visited Harrison. "You're serious?" he asked, raising his eyebrows as I laid the certificates on his desk. "Dead serious," I said. "We'll let her think I've been hiding a fortune all these years. Something she can't say no to. I want her to expose herself." Harrison leaned back. "It's risky. If she catches on." "She won't," I cut in. "Madison believes she's smarter than me. She always has. That arrogance will blind her." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll plant the seed, but you have to act like you're vulnerable. Make her think you're slipping." I gave him a cold smile. "That won't be hard. She already sees me as half gone." That weekend, Madison came by again, this time without an invitation. She carried a bag of groceries, playing the part of the good daughter. "Thought you could use some help," she said, setting them on the counter. I played along, moving slower than usual, letting my breath catch just enough for her to notice. "Madison," I said, lowering myself into a chair. "There's something I've been meaning to sort out. Some old accounts. Stocks from back when your mother was alive. They've been sitting untouched for decades." Her eyes flickered fast as a spark. Stocks, she repeated casually. Yes, I said. I never told anyone, not even Harrison. They might be worth something now. I've been too tired to check. I let the silence hang, then added, I'd like you to help me with them. After all, you're better with computers. She tried to hide it, but I saw her pulse quicken in the hollow of her throat. Of course, Dad, she said smoothly. I'll look into it for you. Later that night, I called Harrison. She took the bait, I said. He gave a dark chuckle. Now we just watched the fish swim. In the following days, Madison got bolder. She stopped pretending to care about my health and started asking pointed questions. Where exactly are those stock papers, Dad? In the study, I said vaguely. Somewhere in that old folder. I can't recall which drawer. She would hang around longer each time she visited, going through files when she thought I wasn't looking. Once, I caught her standing over the folder, her fingers brushing the certificates as though they were relics from a treasure chest. You shouldn't strain yourself with old paperwork, she said quickly when she saw me watching. I just nodded. You're right. That's why I trust you. The real shocker came a week later. Henry Ford, her father-in-law, the man nearly killed by those poison cigars, called me from the hospital. His voice was weak but clear. Mike, Madison came to see me, he said. My grip on the phone tightened. What did she want? She asked me about your old business ventures. Said she was helping you get your finances in order, Mike. He paused. She wasn't asking like family. She was digging like a gravedigger. I closed my eyes. The pieces were falling into place exactly where I thought they would. Henry, I said softly. Don't tell her more than she already knows. And for God's sake, don't smoke anything she gives you. He let out a strained laugh that turned into a cough. Don't worry, he said. I learned my lesson. The next weekend, Madison invited me to dinner at her house. Just a simple meal, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I arrived to find her table perfectly set, candles glowing. Her husband, Caleb, barely spoke, his eyes darting nervously between us. I could tell he knew more than he dared to say. Madison poured me wine, even though she knew I rarely drank. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. I took a sip, but didn't swallow. Instead, I let the liquid just touch my lips before setting the glass down. So, Madison, I said calmly. Have you had any luck with those old stocks? She leaned forward, her eyes shining. Yes, Dad. I think they could be worth a lot. Enough to make things easier for you, for all of us. Her smile widened, but there was a hungry look behind it, sharp as teeth. Caleb dropped his fork with a clatter. Madison shot him a glare that could slice through bone. I tilted my head. Caleb, you seem a little nervous. He stammered. It's just hot in here. Madison's hand clamped over his. He's fine. We're all fine. That night back at home, I wrote in my journal. She's chasing shadows, thinking they're gold. But Caleb knows. He's cracking. And when he does, the whole house of cards will come down. 2 days later, Harrison called me into his office. He had intercepted a request Madison filed with the bank. She had tried to use her power of attorney documents to get access to the supposed stock accounts. Except, Harrison said, waving the papers, she used the forged signature again. And this time, we've got time-stamped surveillance and handwriting analysis all aligned. I let out a long breath. She's tightening the noose around her own neck. Harrison nodded. 1 or 2 more steps and we'll have enough to not only clear your name but bury hers in court. But the real revelation came unexpectedly. Late one evening, Caleb knocked on my door. He stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes filled with something between fear and shame. Mr. Carter, he said quietly. I can't keep this to myself anymore. Madison, she told me everything. She said once you're gone, she gets everything. Insurance, property, even those stocks. And he said, if I don't back her, I'll be left with nothing. I just looked at him, my silence heavier than any question. Finally, he whispered, she's planning something else, something soon, and I think you should be careful. I let him sit in my study while I made some coffee. The man trembled, his hands shaking as he held the mug. She isn't the woman I married, he said. She's obsessed, Mike. Obsessed with what you have, not who you are. I leaned forward, my voice as steady as a rock. Caleb, the only way to stop her is to let her expose herself. I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? He swallowed hard, then nodded. Good, I said. Because when she finally reaches for the kill, I'll be waiting. The warning Caleb gave me played in my head for days. She's planning something else. Something soon. His voice cracked with fear, and I knew he wasn't exaggerating. I didn't have to wait long. 2 mornings later, I found a new pill bottle sitting on my kitchen counter. Amber glass, a white cap, neatly labeled with my name. Except I hadn't seen that doctor in years, and I hadn't ordered any prescription. I held it up to the light. The pills inside were off-white, chalky, and unmarked, not the standard tablets. A coldness spread through me. She's escalating. Instead of throwing it away, I slipped the bottle into an envelope and drove it straight to Harrison's. He didn't even open it. We'll run a test. Don't touch another one. I nodded. My chest was tight, not from illness this time, but from anger. She's not just greedy anymore, Harrison. She's reckless. That makes her dangerous. That evening, Henry called from the hospital again. His voice was frail, but his words carried weight. Mike, he rasped. Madison came again. Asked about your insurance. Pushed me to tell her if you still had policies active. He paused. She said the word, payout. I closed my eyes. Insurance. So that was her angle. She wanted me gone, officially, legally, so she could collect. Henry, I said firmly, do not meet her alone again. Ever. He chuckled weakly. Don't worry. Next time I'll let the nurses just send her away. I spent that night at my desk writing in my journal, the lamplight trembling over the page. How did I get here? A daughter who once clung to my hand at the zoo, begging for ice cream. A girl who cried when I left for business trips. Now, the same woman who poisons cigars, messes with medicine, and talks about payouts as if I'm a policy, not her father. For the first time, I felt grief, not just for my wife, who had passed years before, but for the daughter I'd lost long before death had touched me. The next day, Harrison called. His tone was sharper than usual. The pills, he said, came back positive. Rat poison, crushed and pressed into a capsule. 1 or 2 might not kill you right away, but enough in your system and your lungs would give out. Perfect cover story. Pneumonia returning. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. So she wants me to look like I died of natural causes. Harrison paused. Mike, we need to act soon. She's already crossed the line into attempted murder. I let the silence stretch, then said, not yet. She has to show her hand completely. If we strike too early, she'll twist it, say I was confused, senile. She'll walk away. No, she has to bury herself with her own shovel. That weekend, Madison invited me over again. This time, she insisted on cooking. I've been learning some new recipes, she said brightly on the phone. You'll love it, Dad. A hearty stew. Good for your lungs. The words made my stomach turn. At Harrison's urging, I quietly alerted the police. They agreed to place a recording device on me, hidden in my jacket button. They also wired a small camera in my glasses, undetectable. I felt ridiculous, like some old man playing spy games. But then I thought of Henry collapsing, gasping for air, of Caleb trembling at my doorstep, of the pill bottle on my counter, and the absurdity vanished, replaced by resolve. Her home smelled of rosemary and garlic. A pot was simmering on the stove, steam curling into the air. Madison moved around the kitchen with the confidence of someone who believed she was already the winner. "Sit, Dad," she said warmly. "Dinner will be ready in 10. I lowered myself into the chair, adjusting my glasses just enough to angle the lens toward the counter. My eyes caught a small vial beside the cutting board, unlabeled. She ladled the stew into bowls, humming softly. Then, as if she'd practiced it, she sprinkled a pinch of powder from the vial into mine. Not hers, not Caleb's. Mine. My heart hammered, but my face stayed still. "Here you go," she said sweetly, setting it before me. Caleb's hands fidgeted in his lap. His eyes darted between me and the bowl. He opened his mouth and closed it, his jaw trembling. "Go on, Dad," Madison urged. "It's good for you." I lifted the spoon, holding it just over the surface. The camera was recording everything. Then I set it down. "Madison," I said quietly. "Why don't you take the first bite?" Her smile flickered just a bit. "Oh, Dad, it's made just for you. You need it more." Caleb's fork clattered onto the table, his voice cracking. "Madison, stop it. Just stop." She froze, her eyes blazing. "What are you talking about?" He shoved his chair back. "I can't keep lying for you. He knows. Everyone knows." Madison's face went completely white. Then she turned to me, her voice dripping venom. "You set me up." I met her gaze, steady as a rock. "No, Madison, you set yourself up." She stormed away from the table, her heels hitting the floor like gunshots. The door to the kitchen slammed shut. I sat there in the silence that followed, Caleb shaking beside me, the untouched bowl of stew getting cold. When I finally got up, I put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing tonight." He nodded, tears in his eyes. I don't know what happens now." "Now," I said, my voice cold but calm. "Now we let the law do its job." But Madison didn't know that yet. She still thought she had a chance. And that was exactly what was going to be her undoing. That night back home, I wrote in my journal again. "The trap is almost closed. She tried to kill me with cigars, with pills, with food. Each time she failed, but failure has only made her more desperate. Soon she would try one last time. And when she did, the world would see her for who she truly was." I set the pen down, staring at the quiet of my study. For the first time in months, I felt something that was almost peace. I had thought the storm had passed after the poisoned food, but silence has a way of whispering threats. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside my window. At first, I told myself it was nothing, a stray animal, the wind shifting the branches, but then I saw headlights crawl across my walls, slow and searching, as if someone out there wanted to remind me that they weren't finished. I didn't move. I just sat in the dark, breathing quietly. For the first time in years, I understood what it felt like when danger didn't come with noise, but with patience. That was Madison's way. She had inherited my quiet nature, my steadiness, but she had twisted it into a weapon. The next morning, I called Detective Sanchez. My hand ached from gripping the phone so hard, but my voice stayed level. I told him what I had seen, the car circling my house, the lights cutting through my sleep. He wanted to push for a warrant right then. He said it was intimidation, that she was escalating. But I told him, not yet. Madison hadn't shown her final hand. If we cornered her too soon, she'd find a way to explain it all away. Coincidence. Misunderstanding. She'd flash that sharp smile and twist the story until I was the paranoid old man. I couldn't afford that. So, I asked him for one more move, one more piece of rope for her to hang herself with. He didn't like it. He said I was gambling with my own life. I told him it wasn't gambling. It was patience. Later that afternoon, Caleb came to me. He looked worse than before. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped, the weight of secrets dragging him down. The moment he stepped inside, he whispered, "She knows I talked." I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same place Madison used to do her homework. I asked him to tell me everything. He said she had screamed at him, called him a traitor, and told him he had ruined their lives. She hadn't slept in days. She paced the house, checked numbers, and made phone calls at odd hours. Then he said the words that froze my blood. "Yesterday, she asked me to check your car. She wanted me to make sure the brakes were still working." I felt the silence wrap around us. I asked him to repeat it, and he did, his voice breaking. "She wanted to make sure that when you drove, the car would take you downhill and never stop. She wasn't talking about the past anymore. She was planning the end." Caleb broke down at my table, sobbing into his hands, saying she told him once it was over, she would be free. Free of debt. Free of me. And then the insurance. Always the insurance. I laid a hand on his shoulder and told him the truth he couldn't say aloud. She wasn't asking for freedom. She was asking for my death. That night I went into the garage. The sedan sat quietly in the dim light as it always had, loyal in its silence. 18 years of service, vacations, grocery runs. Even nights when Madison had once begged me for ice cream, laughing in the passenger seat. Now the same hood was meant to become my coffin. I looked at my reflection in the windshield. Old, tired, lungs rattling faintly, but still alive. She thought my weakness made me easy prey. She forgot who taught her patience in the first place. I called Harrison again. I told him to wire the car, every inch of it. Bolts, lines, brakes. If she touched a single part, I wanted it on record. He said I had ice in my veins. I told him it wasn't ice. It was patience. 3 days later, patience rewarded me. I parked down the block and walked home through the shadows. From the trees, I had a clear view of my driveway. And there she was, Madison, my daughter, my blood. She was crouched under the hood with a flashlight in her teeth, her hands moving with practiced certainty. She wasn't fumbling. She knew exactly what to cut. I stood there in the darkness, my heart pounding, but my face calm, as the hidden camera above the garage captured every detail. For 25 minutes, she worked, stopping only to wipe her hands on a rag. When she was finished, she stood over the car almost tenderly, like an artist admiring her work. Then she slipped into her vehicle and drove away as if nothing had happened. I didn't move until her tail lights disappeared. Then I walked to my car and placed my hand on the hood. The metal was still warm. My chest hurt, not with fear, but with memory. She used to sit here swinging her legs, begging me for sundaes, and now she had turned the same car into a death trap. I went back inside and sat down, staring at the empty chair across the kitchen table. I had lost her long before this moment, but seeing her crouched in the driveway with that steady hand, it felt like burying her twice. The next morning, Harrison called. His voice was clipped. She cut the brake line clean. If you'd driven downhill, you wouldn't have made it past the corner. I closed my eyes. It was enough. More than enough. They had her now. But instead of relief, I felt grief pressing against my ribs. Arresting her meant trials, headlines, and years in prison. My daughter, my Madison. Yet, what choice did I have? Leaving her free meant my death. That evening, I visited Henry in the hospital. He was pale. His body weakened, but his eyes carried the same sharpness I remembered from our younger years. I told him she had tampered with my car. His eyes closed. "God help us," he murmured. "She's going to destroy herself." I told him. "She already has." He looked at me for a long time, then asked if I would testify against my daughter. I clenched my fists. I told him that if it was the only way to stay alive, I would. But more than survival, I wanted her to see the truth, to face what she had become. The following morning, Caleb returned, his face hollow, his voice scraped raw. He said she was waiting for me to drive that day. She believed it was over, that the car would finish what she started. He said she told him once it was done, she would finally breathe again. I looked him in the eye and told him that today she would learn what freedom costs. That night I prepared everything. The police had the footage. The car was wired, cameras hidden. My journal lay open in my lap as I wrote, "Tomorrow Madison faces the truth. Tomorrow she buries herself in the grave she dug for me." I closed the book and placed it on the table beside me. Then I whispered into the silence of the room, my voice steady, final. "Tomorrow. My daughter tries to kill me for the last time." Morning arrived, gray and heavy, the kind of sky that presses down on your shoulders before you even step outside. I knew it would be the day everything shifted. My coffee sat untouched on the table. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I was waiting. By 10 o'clock, Detective Sanchez's unmarked car was parked 2 houses down, hidden beneath the limbs of an old oak. Another sedan I didn't recognize idled farther back, officers inside with cameras trained on my driveway. Every move had been rehearsed, every angle prepared. All I had to do was play my part. An old man stepping into his car, unaware of what waited beneath the hood. But I wasn't unaware. I was wide awake. I dressed carefully, a pressed shirt, slacks, the leather shoes Madison had once given me for Father's Day. They had scuffs now, creases across the top, but I wore them anyway. I wanted her to see them, to remember that once she had been capable of love. When I stepped outside, the air smelled damp, almost metallic. My hands didn't shake. I walked to the car as if I were heading to the grocery store. As I opened the driver's side door, I glanced across the street. Madison's car had just turned the corner, crawling slowly toward me, her posture stiff behind the wheel. She parked half a block away. Too far to greet me, but close enough to watch. Her eyes locked on me. I sat in the driver's seat, the leather cold beneath me. For a moment, I let myself remember the early years. Madison in the passenger seat, hair tangled by the wind, laughter spilling from her mouth as we drove with no destination. I let that image linger because I knew it was about to die. Then I turned the key. The engine roared, smooth and steady. I eased the car forward just a few feet, enough to prove the point. And that's when the trap closed. Sanchez's cruiser came alive. Lights flashing, siren piercing the quiet street. The officers moved with precision, boxing her in before she had time to react. Madison's head jerked around, her face frozen between confusion and fear. She tried to start the car again, but the door was wrenched open. Her body was pulled out, her arms pinned behind her back. "Madison Hale, you're under arrest for attempted murder." The officer's voice boomed. Her scream split the morning. Not words, just a raw, jagged sound. She twisted against the cuffs, her eyes wild, searching for me. And when they finally locked onto mine, the betrayal cut both ways. "Dad," she shouted. "Tell them. Tell them I didn't." But I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. For a second, I almost wanted to believe her, to erase the footage, to burn the evidence. But then I remembered Henry gasping for air. I remembered Caleb's trembling voice. I remembered the brake line, cut clean. I opened the door and stepped onto the driveway. My voice carried farther than I expected, steady, unbroken. "Madison," I said, "you tried to kill me." Her face collapsed as if the weight of those words finally broke something inside her. She didn't fight anymore. She sagged against the officers, staring at me with a mixture of rage and despair. The neighbors had begun to gather, murmuring from their lawns, pulling out their phones. I hated the spectacle of it all, but there was no hiding now. My private war had spilled into daylight. At the station, Harrison walked me through the paperwork. The footage was solid. The cigars traced back to her. Caleb's testimony filled the gaps. She would face charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, reckless endangerment. The words sounded clinical, too clean for what she had done. But they carried weight. They meant accountability. That night, alone in my kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the empty chair across from me. The silence was worse than before. At least when she was free, I could imagine she might walk through the door again. Now she was caged, and the distance between us had become absolute. But the story wasn't over. Arrests are only beginnings. The trial would come, and with it, every buried secret would be dragged into the open. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse, the oak benches polished to a shine, the air thick with whispers. Madison was led in, her orange jumpsuit stark against her pale skin. She refused to look at me, her eyes stayed forward, jaw clenched. Caleb sat behind me, shoulders hunched, his guilt hanging like smoke. The prosecutor laid out the evidence in calm, methodical strokes. The poisoned cigars, the brake line footage, the bank statements showing her debt, the insurance policy naming her as beneficiary. Each piece fell into place like stones in a grave. Her lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid, delusional, a sick old man inventing stories to punish his daughter. But when the footage rolled, of her crouched beneath my hood with a flashlight in her teeth, the room went completely still. Even her lawyer had no words. Madison finally spoke. Her voice cracked, but her words were sharp. "I didn't want to kill you. I just wanted to be free." The prosecutor pressed, "Free from what, Ms. Hale?" And Madison's eyes flicked to me at last. "From him, from always being second, from never being enough. He gave everything to everyone else, his friends, his job, his causes. But not to me. Never to me." Her words hit harder than the evidence. Because buried inside the venom was a fragment of truth. I hadn't always been the father she needed. I had been distant at times, stubborn, focused on survival more than affection. And now that neglect had grown teeth. But neglect doesn't cut brake lines. When the court adjourned for the day, Caleb and I stepped outside into the cool evening air. He lit a cigarette, his hands shaking. "She's going to blame you until the end," he said quietly. I nodded. "And I'll carry it because it's mine to carry. But her choices, those are hers alone." That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house felt like her footsteps. Every gust of wind was like her whisper. I walked the room slowly, touching the furniture, the photographs, the remnants of a family I thought would outlast me. And I wondered, not for the first time, if survival was victory or just another form of punishment. The trial stretched on. Witnesses were called. Experts testified. Neighbors recounted strange visits, late-night arguments, whispered threats. Each day, the weight pressed heavier on my chest. And yet, through it all, I stayed because I had to, because truth demanded a witness. When I took the stand, the courtroom hushed. I told them everything. The cigars, Henry's collapse, the poisoned air in his living room, the car, her crouched in my driveway with my daughter's hands inside its heart. My voice didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I spoke as though I were writing my will. And when I stepped down, I caught Madison's eyes one last time. For a flicker, I saw not rage, not hate, but fear. As if she finally understood the gravity of what she had done. The gavel struck, echoing like thunder. Court adjourned. Tomorrow the verdict will come. I walked outside into the fading light. The courthouse steps were cold beneath my shoes. The world felt suspended, as if holding its breath. Tomorrow would bring closure or another storm. But tonight, I stood between the past and future. An old man stripped bare by betrayal, waiting for justice to decide if it still remembered my name. The day of the sentencing felt colder than any winter I'd lived through. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant, but beneath it was the sour tang of nerves and endings. Madison stood only a few feet away from me in the defendant's chair, her wrists trembling though she kept her chin lifted. My daughter, the child I once carried on my shoulders, the girl who used to press her tiny hand into mine, was now waiting for a judge to decide how many years she would lose. When the sentence came, 18 years, with the possibility of parole after 14, she barely flinched, but her eyes darted once toward me. For a moment, I thought I saw the little girl who once cried when her doll broke, who begged me to fix it. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a hollow stare, as if she had already locked herself away from this world. The gavel fell. The officers took her arms. Chains rattled softly as she was led away. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched the back of her head, the same dark hair her mother once had, until the courtroom doors swallowed her whole. People expected me to feel triumph, closure, maybe even relief. Instead, I felt the weight of years pressing harder. Justice had been served, yes, but justice doesn't hug you at night. Justice doesn't call you on your birthday. Justice doesn't erase the echo of betrayal in your blood. Afterward, Caleb walked beside me down the courthouse steps. He said nothing at first, then quietly, "Dad, do you think she ever loved us? Or was it always about the money?" I paused, staring at the gray stone steps beneath my shoes. "She loved us once," I said, my voice low. "But somewhere along the line, she started loving what she thought she was owed more than who we were." Caleb swallowed, his throat tight. He wanted to say more. I could feel it, but the words caught in his chest. Sometimes the silence between a father and son says more than any speech. The weeks that followed felt strange, hollow. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I found myself waking up early, making coffee for no one, setting out 2 mugs before realizing there was only me. The absence of Madison's voice, whether angry, distant, or sweet, rang louder than any presence ever could. But life doesn't stop out of respect for your grief. It moves steadily, relentlessly. Bills needed paying. The porch steps still creaked. The garden weeds didn't wait for me to mourn. So I began tending to them. I repaired the porch with my own hands. It took me 3 afternoons, the hammer echoing in the silence. Each strike felt like an answer to the question, what do I do now? Then I planted tomatoes, peppers, and a row of beans. My hands sank into the soil, black and cool. Dirt under your nails is a simple, grounding thing. It doesn't ask who betrayed you or why. It just asks for water, sun, and patience. And in return, it gives you something alive. Neighbors noticed. Mrs. Turner from across the street waved one morning, then brought me soup. She sat with me on the porch, talking about her late husband, how grief never truly leaves, but it becomes lighter when you share it. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not as the man whose daughter tried to kill him, but simply as Mike, her neighbor. Henry Ford, meanwhile, was recovering. The poison had nearly ended him, but he was stubborn. One afternoon, I saw him crossing my yard, leaning on a cane. He sat beside me without a word. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. "I owe you my life," he muttered. I shook my head. "You don't owe me. We were both victims of the same box." He chuckled dryly, coughed, then said, "Funny thing about almost dying, it makes you notice small mercies. This breeze, for instance." We sat there in silence, listening to the leaves tremble in the wind. Survivors don't always need words. Sometimes we just need the quiet company of someone who understands. Caleb visited often. At first, it was out of worry. I'd find him in the garden, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands. "You're working too hard," he'd say. "Work is what keeps me breathing," I replied. One evening, after helping me stake the tomatoes, he lingered. His voice broke the twilight silence. "Dad, do you ever think about forgiving her?" I leaned on the shovel, sweat dripping down my temple. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, son. It's a slow erosion. Right now, the wound's too raw. But maybe one day. Maybe." He nodded, his jaw tight. I could see the conflict in him. She was his wife, after all. Betrayal doesn't erase blood, but it tangles it into knots you can't undo. Time passed. Months slid into seasons. The tomatoes ripened, sweet and red. The porch no longer groaned under my steps. I started volunteering at the local community center, fixing chairs, teaching kids how to sand wood, and reading aloud when their parents couldn't. There was something about those children, wide-eyed, hungry for attention, that tugged at a place inside me. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was redemption, maybe both. Madison once sat with those same wide eyes, waiting for me to notice her. I did, but not enough. And I'll carry that truth until my last breath. Helping those kids didn't erase what happened, but it reminded me that presence, quiet, consistent presence, is more powerful than money, gifts, or promises. Did I think of Madison every day? Did I forgive her? Not fully. Maybe never. Some nights I dreamed of her as a child, gripping my hand on the way to school, smiling when I told her a bad joke. In those dreams, she still loved me without calculation. Waking from them was always the hardest part. But over time, I learned something. Peace doesn't arrive like a storm breaking. It creeps in slowly, hidden in the ordinary. In the way a neighbor waves, in the laughter of children at the community center, in the taste of a homegrown tomato. Peace didn't come with the verdict. It came in these small, stubborn mercies. One autumn afternoon, Caleb and I sat on the porch, mugs of coffee warming our hands. The garden stretched before us, leaves turning gold. "You seem lighter these days," he said. "Maybe I am," I answered. Maybe I finally stopped asking why and started asking what now. He looked at me for a long time, then quietly, "I'm glad you're still here, Dad." The words landed heavier than any gavel, warmer than any verdict. In that moment, I realized something. Survival is not just about living through betrayal. It's about living beyond it. So, can a man like me ever find peace after his daughter tried to erase him? Not the kind of peace that forgets. No, that's a fairy tale. But the kind of peace that lets you wake up, tend your garden, help a neighbor, laugh with your son. That peace is real. I've learned that betrayal may scar you, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. You carry the scar, yes, but you also carry on. And in the end, that is enough. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.